Good afternoon, everyone. Just before I start, I'm going to do a quick sound check because my internet has been a little bit funny. If you can all hear me, just put me a thumbs up or send some emoji on the chat so I know we're all good to start. All right, super. Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amna Rida. I'm the Aviation X Lab manager. Thank you for being with us in today's session. What we're going to discuss in today's session is Cycle 2 of Aviation X Lab. What I'm going to do is we have a brief agenda of what we're going to be discussing. We then have some things that we're going to share with you in terms of how to apply, timelines, and things relating to the program. We've then received a couple of different questions from the audience that we're going to run through. And if time permits, then we're also going to have some more questions from the audience. If at any point there's anything that you feel you haven't shared or you want us to answer, please feel free to put it up in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat so I can run through those questions once the discussion is over. All right, so just in terms of the agenda, real quick, I'm going to run you through what Aviation X Lab is, our partners, Cycle 2 Moonshot, how to apply. We're using a new platform. And then the last part, as I mentioned, is going to be Q&A. So the Aviation X Lab is an incubator accelerator mashup that was founded by 5 corporate partners, Emirates Airline, Airbus, Collins Aerospace, GE, and Thales. We launched in October of 2019 out of Dubai, and we have been running ever since. Now, the whole entire objective behind Aviation X Lab is to really think about innovations, but from a different perspective, not only through corporate innovations and your standard way of doing innovation, and not only through startups as well. We really look at multidisciplinary acts of talent, whether that's a startup, a researcher, investors, companies of different stages. And if they're relevant to the challenge that we're trying to solve, then we invite them to submit their idea. Why do I say this is a very important point? Because we always get the question of, what stage do we need to be at? And, what if we're a company? What if we're a startup? And the Aviation X Lab is really one of those few programs that caters to different stages, again, depending on the challenge. Now, the Aviation X Lab looks at moonshot. And for those of you that are familiar with the startup ecosystem, a moonshot is a extremely impossible to achieve objective. And why we chose to work on moonshots is because when you look at the aviation industry, there's so much that you can innovate, and there's never going to be one solution that's going to solve everything. So we say, here's the moonshot that we're trying to achieve, and then we have multiple solutions through multiple challenges that are going to enable us to reach that moonshot. A little bit of background history. We launched the Aviation X Lab in October 2019, and we launched our first cycle. The first cycle was focused purely on sustainability, and it was framed carbon negative aviation industry. We worked with major different startups. We have 3 alumni, of who one of them transformed into a commercial contract. The way that Aviation X Lab works will run you through exactly what the program timeline looks like. But again, I don't want to set at the benchmark of last year just because COVID took place during last year. So for those of you who were with us during the last year, for those of you who applied, as you know, so many changes took place. We have a little bit of an adjusted program for this year. But again, if you have any specific questions or you want to understand how the program is going to work and it's going to be structured that we haven't covered in today's session, feel free to reach out to myself or Nujud, and we'll be very happy to schedule a one-on-one session as well. Now, when we look at the Aviation X Lab, our vision, as I mentioned, was always focused on the future. But having said that, focusing on the future also entails looking at long-term, but also short-term. And that's really what we do in Aviation X Lab. We look at small challenges that will enable us to reach that final moonshot. For this specific cycle, Cycle 2, we conducted lots of different webinars and sessions to understand really what is it that the aviation industry needs now, especially in a post-COVID era. During COVID specifically, we launched a different challenge, which was the traveler well-being, and it was purely focused on how do you instill safety with passengers. For this cycle, we thought, all right, we might be a little bit beyond the stage of instilling safety. People are traveling, demand is coming back, but it's all about how do you bring that joy to journey back. What does that mean, right? For those of you who have traveled in the last 12 to 18 months, you would know exactly how much has changed in the travel world, from the security that's been, impacted for years, all the way to the manual processes, the PCRs, the COVID tests. How do you apply, and which countries accept which vaccinations. So it's been quite stressful for any passenger to travel. And even before COVID took place, there was always a lot of lag time in your journey, whether that is through your destination, whether that's through security, through the airport. And so we really want to focus on all the different key touch points of the airport, and then how do you bring joy back into that journey. So not only thinking about specific segments of the airport, we're thinking about the entire journey from A to Z, and looking at really trying to transform each part of that journey. Now, what we decided to do is, if we look at the passenger journey, as I mentioned, it is quite extensive and there are endless touch points. What we had decided to do is, let's look at the 3 touch points that have the most opportunity and the most space for transformation. And the focus areas that were defined are doorway to runway, in-flight, connections, and transfers. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide just because a couple of the questions that we got were on this. If anyone has any additional questions after, just please feel free to write it in the chat and we'll cover it as well. Now, when we look at doorway to runway, that's really your entire airport experience. That's from the second you leave your doorway all the way to the runway. So that includes your baggage, that includes checking in, that includes your security and immigration process, navigating your way around the airport. All these different steps mean your doorway to runway. Now we're really trying to create a seamless experience. What does that mean? Think of biometrics, right? That's one technology that's enabled us to be relatively seamless. But that's already been installed in the XB airport. So we're looking for the next best thing to continue enabling that seamless process. Then the next part is in-flight. Now, for those of you who have traveled, you know how different the experience on board the plane is compared to, let's say, your standard restaurant or hotel experience, right? Even though it doesn't need to be very different. So our really objective is to try to make the in-flight experience as personalized as possible, as comfortable as possible, and of course, bringing that joy back to it. So if you think of the hotel experience, the stress-free aspect of it, these are the different kind of vision that we have, and we're looking for solutions that will enable us to instill that. Now, the last part is one that's really been, I want to say, under-examined from a potential perspective, but it's one that really impacts almost all of the passengers on a daily basis, especially out of the XB airport, and that's connections and transfers. Now, connections and transfers have always been a challenging place, just because you're dealing with multiple airports, you're transferring luggage from one terminal to another. You don't really know what's happening in between. Again, you have to deal with 2 different airports, 2 different gates, navigating your way through them. Are you going to make it in time? Are you not? If there is a delay, how are you going to be handled? And so we really want to look at connections and transfers as a joyful step. Obviously, that's not the case at all today because there's so many different moving parts to it, but a lot of things can be facilitated, again, through multiple products and innovations, and that's what we're looking for. Now, the interesting part, what are we looking for? When we first launched Aviation X Lab for Cycle 1, we opened it completely and we said, anyone and everyone who has an idea is, welcome to apply for the Aviation X Lab. For this cycle, we're being slightly more specific and we're looking for, again, startups or individuals or, researchers from multiple domains who have an idea that can be ready for market in the next 12 months. And the reason that we've added this 12 months is because what we noticed that sometimes we can bring people on board, and for them to be able to incubate their idea and all the way until their idea graduates takes a little bit longer than the program's timeline itself. And so in that sense, they lose out. The partners, it's difficult to really showcase the value because it's still in production stage. Ideally, what we want is for a product, not an absolutely ready product, but more of an MVP that can be incubated during the 3 months that they have in Dubai. Again, it's pretty flexible in terms of what exactly we look for, meaning if you're an established company or an established startup, that's absolutely fine. It's simply the part where it's only an idea, a white paper, which we customarily used to accept in Aviation X Lab. We're just being a little bit more specific on that, just to enable your success more than anything. And then the last part is, of course, how the program is going to be structured. Now, there's multiple stages for the Aviation X Lab application and for the program itself. Now, where we are today is we're in the outreach and applications process. Our application is open, and I'll run you through how you can apply right after the slide. And then this is when we're also conducting a lot of the outreach as well. The second stage is evaluation. Now, all of the applications go through an evaluation process by the Aviation X Lab Council. Who are the Aviation X Lab Council? It's a representative from each of the partners in the subject matter domain that we're discussing. Once we're done with the evaluations, then it jumps to the verification. And the verification is simply an additional step that we run as the Aviation X Lab team, and this just handles all of the basic checks. The last part is, of course, approval. Now, any startup or any company that we're going to be onboarding receives approval from the Aviation X Lab board. Again, the reason that we have done this is because we want to ensure that there is buy-in from the Aviation X Lab leadership at every stage of the program. And the last part, of course, is onboarding. And this is really when we finalize your process into coming into Dubai and spending that time to work on your solution. What we've done is, once you complete the part where you complete your program in Dubai, the rapid feasibility, we then have the final stage. The final stage consists of 3 different elements. The first one is a virtual program. Apologies, it's not 3 days. It's a 3-month virtual program. And the reason that we've added this virtual program is that we noticed that, like I mentioned, once the startups come in, once the individuals come in, the applicants, they require more time to really build those connections with the partners, to work on their solution, their financial proposal, their business proposal. And we wanted to ensure that there's sufficient time to be able to do that, not only when you're in ground in Dubai. So we're opening that up to 3 months virtual the second you get selected. During that virtual process, what's going to be happening is you're going to be introduced to all of the Aviation X Lab program managers. You're going to be introduced to all of the Aviation X Lab partners as well, and then showcasing what your solution is, what is the plan for the trial, what does the financials look like, what would the investment look like. And over those 3 months, that's when we can have the discussions and the negotiations and really try to filter out anything that needs to be filtered out at that stage. Why this is extremely important is because when you land in Dubai, it's going to be hit the ground and run. Why I say that? It's because what we didn't want to do is to waste a lot of time, dealing with a lot of the paperwork that really can be handled virtually. So that's the major change that's taken place in the Aviation X Lab program. After the 3 months, you will still come into Dubai and you will be spending 10 weeks in Dubai, working very closely with the partners on implementing your solution. And this is really where the trial process is going to be happening. Whether it's a product or a service, this is when you're going to be testing out your solution and being able to showcase the value of the solution to the Aviation X Lab partners. We then have the pitch day, which is when you take all of the results of the trial and the results of the business proposal and you pitch it to the Aviation X Lab board members. As you know, the Aviation X Lab also works on an investment scheme, meaning you're able to pitch for investment in 2 formats, time investment and money investment. And during the pitch day, that is when you're going to get the opportunity to do that. And then, of course, we have the final decision, which is any startup that we're going to be investing in, whether it's a financial commitment or a time commitment, receives the approval of the board members. So that's a little bit about how the application stage is and how it differs slightly from the first cycle. Now, in terms of the program timeline, what that looks like. As I mentioned, we've already opened the application process. It's been open from December 6th, and it will continue being open up until the end of March. So that leaves really good chance for everyone to apply. My colleague Tarun is going to run you in just a minute through what that application process looks like. So just bear with us. Once the application closes end of March, we then have a shortlisting selection. And that's going to take place over 6 weeks. And that's, as I mentioned, where we go through the evaluation and the verification process. We then have a period of the rapid feasibility. That's the part that's going to take place initially virtually and then in Dubai. And then we close off the program with a demo day and showcase, again, out of Dubai. That's when you're going to spend the time working on the trial. And then once you complete the trial, pitching it to the Aviation X Lab board members. So that's also on the timeline. Now, in terms of program offerings, this has been consistent with Cycle 1. Each selected applicant is going to receive 50,000 dirhams. Again, this is 50,000 dirhams if you're a single applicant. If it's a team of 2 or more, then it's 75,000 for the team. And this is to cover the cost of your stay in Dubai. The second one is, of course, you get to work with the Aviation X Lab partners. As I mentioned, this is a key opportunity for any applicant that gets selected, because you do get introduced and you do get exposed to all of the 5 partners, whether or not your solution fits all of the 5 partners or not, under the Aviation X Lab umbrella. And again, this is going to happen virtually initially and then in person once you're in Dubai. And then the last part is that you become an alumni of Dubai Future Foundation's network. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, Dubai Future Foundation is a startup and innovation ecosystem in Dubai. And they have also been running for the last 3 years. They have a fantastic database of different challenges that they're always working on, again, in multiple domains. So we sort of come in through the aviation domain. And what they support us with is everything from, if you're interested in obtaining the entrepreneurial visa, to continue extending your time in Dubai, to setting up a license for your company, understanding how does it mean if you want to operate in the UAE officially as a business. So they're readily able to provide all of these services for the applicants under the Aviation X Lab program. Now, the commitments that we require from the startups is, as I mentioned, it's a bit of time commitment, specifically when you are in Dubai. Those are going to be dedicated 10 weeks working very closely with the partners on implementing your solution. Before that, the time commitment is really dependent, again, on the partners that you're working with, on setting up your business proposal. What I will say is this is really your chance to take advantage of having full exposure to the partners. But again, the time commitment is virtual, so it's a little bit more flexible. And then, of course, to comply by the rules and regulations of Aviation X Lab program, the selected applicants will have the terms and conditions that they will need to sign on. All right, just the last part, I think. All right, how to apply. I'm going to hand this to my colleague Tarun, just because we've partnered with a new platform called F6S for applications. It's a little bit different than what we customarily had in Cycle 1, but really easy. So I'm just going to give it to Tarun. If you can just take the team through what that application process looks like. Thank you.
Hi, Amna. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to quickly walk you through how to apply on the F6S platform. I'll walk you through the journey itself. As you go to the Aviation X Lab /Cycle 2, on the bottom, you have the Apply Now button. You click on it. It takes you to the F6S portal. You can either log in or create your credentials. And as soon as you create your credentials, it would ask you to onboard and put your company details. If you already have an account, like I do in this example, it would take a couple of minutes to sort of import your whole existing profile that you have updated as per your company details on F6S. And as you come to the bottom, these are 7 questions that we have created for the Aviation X Lab Cycle 2. These are the stages of the business, your previous client studies, your annual revenue, your KPI or metrics, and you could also, on the bottom, ask for recommendations and hit on Apply Now. It's as simple as it gets. If there's any questions, happy to take it, but over to you, Amna. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Tarun. Yeah, just to run through what Tarun has mentioned, it's quite a simple application process. And again, it just requires you to upload different documents. Relatively straightforward it is. The link is present on our website. You'll find it as soon as you access that. But again, if if there's any complications, or if you want our support and guidance as you work through the application process, we're more than happy to help you through that. Please do feel free to go on and submit your application whenever you're ready. However, during March timeframe, that's when the Aviation X Lab Council is going to be accessing applications. So if they are in a ready stage, that's of course a lot more better and a lot more secure. However, you do have the next 2 months to work on the application. And if you want support from us, we're happy to provide that support at any time. All right, just I think the last slide, Najud. All right, now the fun part. Just give me a second. I'm gonna pull out the Q&As that we had, the questions that we had received from some of you. And then if there are any other questions, I think we should be able to answer a couple more. Just feel free to put things on the chat. All right, I'm gonna go through the questions that we received, like the most frequently asked questions over the last few days. A couple of them we went through anyways during the presentation, but I'll still go ahead and answer them. And if you feel that we missed out on anything, please feel free to reach out to us at any point. All right, so duration of the cohort and finances to support individuals. As we mentioned, the duration of the cohort is split into 2 parts. We have a 3 months virtual program, which is followed by 10 weeks of in-person program. The virtual aspect, as I mentioned, is relatively low commitment, whereas the in-person one is obviously a lot more time intensive and going to take place physically in Dubai. In terms of finances, each team is going to be receiving between 50,000 to 75,000, depending on the number of the applicants, and that will be to cover your expenses during your time in Dubai. Now, how does aviation, I got this question quite a lot, which was interesting. How does aviation survive during the pandemic? For those of you who witnessed Dubai Air Show, or have been following up on Dubai Air Show the last couple of weeks, this was the first, relatively the first air show to take place since the pandemic happened. What was funny enough and interesting enough is that it attracted more visitors than even pre-COVID levels. So when I say demand is there and interest is there, it definitely is. And how the aviation world is going to continue surviving is really by continuous innovation. The travel systems that were in place pre-COVID are not going to be taking us to the next level of aviation in the next 12 to 18 months. That's why we're really here to try and innovate and to try to focus on what does the passenger require? How do we continue innovating and ensuring that we are progressing and not simply, being stagnant where we are? Yes, it's been really difficult on the aviation industry in the last 18 months, but recovery is there. And I think we're beyond recovery as well. And it's really come to a point where it's time to innovate and to really think of what does aviation looks like post the pandemic world. Another question that we kept, another question that we kept getting, which our bad, it might be a little bit confusing. It's what is doorway to runway? And as we explained, doorway to runway is really that segment of your travel experience, which is once you leave your house all the way until the door of the plane. It's really that part that includes, your transportation all the way to the airport. What does your check-in process look like? How is your luggage handled? Your security, your immigration, again, your journey through the airport itself, all the way until you reach the door of the plane. So that's really the part that we're trying to innovate and to focus on as well. How to submit ideas to the Aviation X Lab, as we mentioned, and I think my colleague Tarun just put up a link. More than welcome to click on the link. You will see also the F6S over there, and that's how you can submit your ideas. If you feel that you're not ready to submit your idea yet, but you want to discuss it with the Aviation X Lab team, we're happy to set a call as well. Please feel free to contact myself and Najud, and we'll set the time accordingly. And the last question I got is, if you don't have a team and your idea is in a document format. Now, customarily, the Aviation X Lab would accept, idea format products and services. And if you feel that your idea or product has a timeline where it can be ready for market in the next 12 months, then I would say you're more than welcome to apply. But again, we do have that specific clause that whatever we want to focus on, we want to ensure that we can be able to graduate an actual product or service in the next 12 months. So that would be the only restriction I have. Again, as I mentioned, we're more than happy to set up any additional calls if you want to just brainstorm and run us through what your ideas are, which stage it's at. We're happy to do that as well. Thank you for joining us. This is the first official webinar for Aviation X Lab. I know it's taking place right before the holiday season, but we are going to have additional webinars coming up in the next couple of weeks. They're going to be more specific around each part of the focus areas that I shared. So if there's any that you feel are relevant to you, please do stay updated. We are going to be hosting these sessions. And if you feel like you want to discuss anything additional program specific, then Najood and I will be the people to connect with. Thank you again for making the time. Really appreciate it. Wishing everyone a fantastic holiday season, and we'll all stay in touch. Thank you.